Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Professors at McMurry. I'm Paul Fabrizio,
I'm Don Frazier.
and we are going to explore a different aspect of university life today. An aspect that, to be honest, when Don and I were in college, we never encountered at all. And that's not showing just our age, but it's showing how the educational profession has moved. So our guest today is Erica Medina. And Erica, why don't you tell everybody your title, and then we're going to start asking you about that title.
Yeah, so my title is Assistant Dean of Students for Student Engagement.
Okay.
That probably means something different at a school across town, student engagement.
I'm missing that.
Well, that
reference.
happens your sophomore year. You get engaged.
Oh,
Oh,
That's
my
student
goodness.
engagement.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
That's just a bad pun.
Yeah,
That's funny.
We'll just ignore that. And,
But you know it's true.
It
All right,
is
sorry.
true.
But we're not talking about any specific university, are
Mm.
we there, Don?
No, we're not.
No, we're not. Okay. Anyway, Erica, welcome to the show. You're an assistant dean. So do we call you dean? Is that the correct title to call you?
I don't really know. Students just call me Erica, Miss Erica, and I'm totally fine with that. I think being called a dean, I don't know. It's a little weird. I haven't adjusted yet.
Okay. Now, tell us just from the title
hmm
what your job is. And then we want to know how you got into your job, and we'll take it from there. But what in the world is student engagement?
So we define at McMurry student engagement is kind of the umbrella term for getting students involved on campus. So my area specifically, I am responsible for overseeing our social clubs. And if you want to create a new social club, you would come to me also, and I'll help you go through that process.
Like resurrecting Kiva would go through you.
Yes, partially through me, and in conjunction with our actual dean of students. So,
And the sheriff.
mhm.
Anyhow.
So yes,
Wow, Don. You had a rough
Strong
morning in
feelings.
class.
That's right, man, salty. Sorry.
Yeah.
oh man,
It'll be fun on the radio this afternoon.
So I'll be even wider awake then.
oh man. Actual orientation stuff falls under me also in my role. So, welcome week, SOARs. So all of our incoming students are required to go through SOAR. And then welcome week with the first year seminar, that all falls under my umbrella also. So it's very broad. And then within that, there's lots of different little pieces.
Okay.
So you're trying to get students
Involved.
engaged.
Involved.
Engaged
Yes.
with the university.
Right.
Because there's always, there's this temptation to go home every weekend.
Yeah, we don't want them to do that.
Yeah, you go home every weekend and still cling to your past, your roots.
hmm
You know, you're being kicked out of the nest, but you still got a couple of fingers, still stuck in the twigs. And that's disastrous, in my
Yes.
opinion, for most students that head off to college. Don't go home till not spring break, but till
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving was the old rule. And so I guess that's part of what you do is try to get them to realign their center of gravity to a
Yeah.
new situation, new place.
Right. We're trying to get them here on our campus and comfortable. With Welcome Week specifically, we try to get them to make friends with their classmates so that they want to stay here. They have a reason to stay. And we do a lot of the programming so that we give them something to do, because we can't bring them here and expect them to find their own stuff. We have to help that process too. So, yeah.
Okay. You're the first one, I think, at McMurry to hold this title.
Yeah, I've never
I
heard
am.
of this before.
I
Yeah.
am. hmm
This is a new thing.
It is. It is very new.
So how long have you been here?
I have been here a year in July, so a year and a couple months.
Okay. And
Mhm.
how does one start out to become an assistant dean for student engagement? I mean,
Yeah.
is that something you wrote down in 5th grade? This is what you want to do?
Put it in your time capsule, open it when you're 18.
Not at all. Actually, I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to know why people do what they do.
Yeah, how does that make you feel?
That's really what I wanted to know for. I'm actually a McMurry alum, so I graduated in 2014 from McMurry, and that's really where my passion for student affairs grew, and where I realized I even had one.
Okay.
Yeah. So our former dean of students, so Vanessa Roberts Bryan, she created a course for 3 of us who were interested in student affairs, and so we took that intro course with her, learned about the history of student affairs, and like when they used to have a dean of men and a
Yep.
dean of women.
That's the way it was when I got here.
Yeah, and how that.
Walter says party. That was the phrase when I got here.
Oh,
What was it?
Walter says party. He was this cool old dude from the Northeast, still carried the accent. And so he was always busting up people that were outside the rules.
Okay.
And for some reason that got turned into a phrase, Walter says party.
Okay.
And so when he retired, it was always about Walter says party. The old timers around McMurry will remember that. It just
Mm.
Okay, he was gone by the time I came 2 years
yeah.
later.
Yeah, exactly right.
So, is that what people are going to say about you?
No.
No. No.
I love the way she put that. No. In fact, they are not. Okay, I think she means it.
Yeah, but so yeah, that's where I learned about it. Was here at McMurry, and then I applied for graduate school at Syracuse University. So that was my top choice. Had no clue if I'd get in or not. I just applied for it. They had a really strong program, and I didn't have to take the GRE, so that was great.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Wait, a
Mhm.
strong program in.
In higher education.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
Their student affairs program is pretty key. And then I don't know if you're familiar with like Vincent Tinto, but he also taught at.
No, I have never heard
So-
of this person. Have you, Don? No.
I thought
Okay,
you were
but-
making it up.
What's his name?
Vincent Tinto.
Okay.
He's kind of like the person who created student engagement and what it is. This
Huh.
whole like theory of basically if you're engaged, then you're retained. How do you retain students on a college campus outside of a classroom?
Okay.
So that's his framework.
So you studied under him.
At his institution. Fortunately, he has other offices in California where he was teaching. So I
Oh.
only got to walk by his office a bunch of times.
But you absorbed all the
Yeah,
vibes that were coming out of
Right,
it.
right. All of like his mentality was definitely rubbed off on all of us. They made sure to do that.
So what academic department houses?
School of Education.
So it's School of Education.
Mhm.
Okay. I wouldn't even know which category to put it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so School of Education, and then my degree's in higher education administration.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
And then you came back to McMurry?
So after grad school, I did a national search and ended up in Louisiana at McNeese State University
Okay.
as their student activities coordinator
In Lake Charles.
in Lake Charles, right? Loved it there, absolutely loved it. But then this position was coming open and it was revamped. The title was new, and so the person in the position was also a mentor to me. But now, unfortunately, she's at Hardin-Simmons. But
No accounting.
Okay.
yeah, but it opened a spot for me anyway, so I applied for it, and here I
So
am.
you can go over there to Cowboy Land. I'm going to the War Hawk country.
Oh yeah,
That's cool.
Okay. Now, you got the position, but it came with this new title of student engagement
It
because
did.
the previous person didn't hold that title, did they?
no,
They had something else, and I forget what it is, unfortunately.
I think it was the assistant dean of the first year.
Okay.
First year experience, something
Yeah,
like that.
something like that. But we've kind of parceled that out, and
So your focus is on all the students or just on the students going through orientation and social
It's-
club life?
it's on all the students. But for a period of time, it's just first year students. And we are at the point in our first year experience where we are looking to start programming not only in the fall, but in the spring. How do we carry that first year truly through the entire first year, not just the first semester? But then on the back end of that, I do have to keep in mind all of our students. So it's kind of tough to keep the balance and keep my mind open to all of the students, but be able to focus in on just the first year students too. So,
Okay.
Because, yeah, seniors are heading for the exit.
right.
And so they're no longer a retention issue. But boy, retaining those freshmen seems to be the key to success no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Freshmen and
Especially at a small
sophomores,
liberal arts
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Freshmen and sophomores are huge.
Yeah, one of
keep
the
them.
interesting things to me is, and it's not just in small liberal arts schools; it's around the country,
Mhm.
big schools, small schools, whatever.
Hmm.
There is a tremendous dropout between those who start college
Hmm.
and the few who actually graduate.
Yeah.
And so, why is that? Why aren't students carrying through and finishing? And so,
Yeah, why they start something then quit it.
yeah, exactly.
And
So this
lots
is
of reasons.
something
Yeah.
that you're focused on.
Yeah, things that I have to pay attention to. And surprisingly, there's lots of things that go into it. So we learn about Generation Z. So we follow the millennial like trends and things like that, what they're
Okay,
interested in.
we're going to talk about that when we come back from our commercial break.
Boy, when we unpack that,
Yeah.
that'll kill a segment.
Is there
right
anything
there.
else you have to focus on or you have to learn about? We still got a couple seconds before our break.
We actually pay attention to politics in a very small way, so that's interesting. We also look to see what other institutions are doing. A lot of collaboration and what are they doing that we're not doing? What could we do better than them? And lots of that stuff. So lots of sharing and not recreating the wheel.
And sharing is caring.
Yeah.
I was going to say something
Yeah,
like that too. Okay, very good. Well, we got 14 seconds left. I'm just curious. Generation Z started when?
Pop quiz.
Pop quiz.
We'll pick it up after
Yeah.
the break.
Yeah,
'cause-
we'll take a break.
give her a sec.
Don't skip! Don't skip! Don't skip! Hello, my name is Christopher Bartlett. I'm the studio manager with the McMurry History Education Group, and you may be used to seeing my name in the end credits, or sometimes you'll see me sitting here as a special guest host. But right now, I'm here to talk to you about an amazing new opportunity. We have created a Patreon. To put it simply, if you enjoy the content on this YouTube channel, then you can head on over to Patreon, donate money to us, and become a patron. And through your donations, more content will be made. Basically, it breaks down like this. With $10, you will receive a short thank you video from Dr. Frazier and Dr. Fabrizio. With $25, you will be able to take part in a patron-only poll. With $50, you will get swag. These items include a choice between 2 prints of paintings and signed copies of Dr. Frazier's books, Blood on the Bayou and Thunder Across the Swamp. With $75, you will receive exclusive videos that will not be available anywhere else, not on YouTube and not on SoundCloud. These videos will be just for you, the patrons. With $100, your name will appear in the credits. See that right there? That's where your name can be. Finally, for $500, we will send you a signed collector's edition of Phil Collins' book, The Alamo and Beyond. Yes, it is signed by Phil Collins himself. And remember, for all the higher donations you do, you also get the stuff from the lower ones as well. So it's pretty cool. And when we reach our goal of $5,000, Dr. Frazier and Dr. Fabrizio will give you their own personal ranking of the presidents from worst to best. Coming from the perspective of a historian like Dr. Frazier and a political science expert like Dr. Fabrizio, you really don't want to miss their ranking and why they put them in that order. If you enjoy this content and want to see more, if you believe in our mission of making history accessible to everyone, then head on over to our Patreon and donate as much money as you're willing to give. You'll help us continue what we're doing, and you'll get amazing gifts as our way of saying thank you. Now we return to your regularly scheduled programming.
And we're back. And welcome to the professors. And I'm Paul Fabrizio.
I'm Don Frazier.
And our guest is Erica Medina, McMurry University's Assistant Dean for Student Engagement.
Yes.
And before the break, we were talking about her job, and really simply,
Mhm.
you're there to get students engaged, just like your title says. That's truth in advertising.
Yeah.
And
Like Anglo-Saxon naming convention.
and one of
Just
the
saying.
things, yeah, watch out for Don Frazier tonight. And one of the things you had mentioned is you had to study Generation Z.
Yes.
So during the break, you looked up Generation Z. When did it start? And what in the world do you study about these people?
So students who were born 1997 after. And what we are studying is basically how they live. How do they act? What are things that they're all doing that we're not doing? Like, how do we appeal to the masses, basically? Because that's the students that we're getting in.
So these are the millennials?
They're not the
No,
millennials.
no.
They're
That's the old generation.
Wow.
hmm So we are moving. We're moving along.
So
Yeah.
these are not the people that take all the heat for being pampered and
Right.
These people are
No.
not pampered, and what's the word I'm looking for?
How do we want to describe that
Well,
previous generation?
yeah,
I mean, the millennials have a bad reputation, I
they
would
do
argue.
They do.
as being entitled.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Now, Generation Z, I've also heard it called the I generation, like the
Yes.
iPhone.
Right, because they are very much the generation that's all about technology. So Generation Z or the I generation, because they're growing up in technology in ways that even I didn't have. So they're pretty interesting.
So, what kind of hints can you
Yeah,
give
I was
us
about to
about
say,
them?
that's
since-
just leaving that meatball
Yeah.
hanging
Yeah.
in the air. Yeah, they're very interesting.
we're teaching them.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Help us understand these people.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that this Generation Z has a huge fear of missing out, which they call it FOMO,
FOMO.
fear of missing out.
Really?
And
Okay.
so a practice that's kind of coming up in my world is how do you leverage the fear of missing out to get them to show up to things and be able to share
Oh,
it.
so you manipulate them into showing up
Right.
based on their fears.
Do they have fears of not receiving passing grades? That's what I want to know.
This
You can tell my 8 o'clock was rocky, man.
this generation is interesting for that reason. Yes, they do have a fear of not doing well or succeeding. This generation very much so wants to be successful in ways that their parents were not, which were probably the millennials, the earlier millennials. And they are, how do I explain it? They are growing up in a time that is very sad almost. So these students are growing up post like 9/11 and all
true.
of the things that are happening after that. This fear of missing out, the music that they listen to, the music that happens, the social isolation. This generation is the most engaged in terms of like social media and things like that, but are lacking the social interaction, the interpersonal skills.
Because all the communication is
Because
done
of all
through
the
telephone.
right.
They hide behind the
Right.
technology.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we are trying to meet them in the middle where how do we appeal to your liking to social media and being on your phone but then also putting them in a classroom and being able to have to do a presentation, to have conversations with people. And that's where they're lacking and they're dropping. So
Yeah, I've noticed that my guys that are doing presentations in class are more and more freaked out about the process.
Really?
Yeah, because I haven't changed that assignment for a decade.
Yeah.
Make a presentation, teach a particular subject to the class. And that way they get to kind of customize their education. Hey, it's an old professor trick.
And they're more freaked out from standing in front of the class or doing the nuts and bolts?
All of it. I mean, in the old days, they would kind of get up there and they would dress accordingly and they would, do a presentation. Now they're just, you can just tell that they feel like there's a great big bright light on them and they're just completely freaked.
Like a huge fear of rejection comes with that.
Yeah.
And like I said, missing out, the rejection, not performing well.
Is that related to the idea that they're more comfortable in front of a camera than in front of people? I mean, the camera on people's phones? Because I have found that students, when you say, let's do something, and they say, can I just do something in my room and just send you the video?
Right.
That is easy.
Yeah.
They are very willing to do that. I had one class where everybody had to do everything on YouTube. And that was easy to get students to do. So,
I mean, because they're
noticed the
growing up
problem.
on YouTube.
Yeah, they are.
Like how to do anything, you just YouTube it.
Yeah.
And you can watch someone else do it. So
yeah, exactly right.
I had the most fascinating experience with my freshman classes this week. It's the week of 9/11.
Right.
And they were all too young. They were 1 year old, 2 years old.
Yeah.
And I said, so what do you know about it? And the reality is they knew nothing about it. They heard about planes crashing into buildings. One student said definitively there were 4 hijackers total because there were 4 planes that were hijacked. And so there was just so much information they didn't know. So it was an opportunity for me to spend about 20 minutes and explain what took place on 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And I made them put down their phones, turn off their computers, and they just were bug-eyed as they learned about it. They just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I mean,
crazy.
I don't mean that as an indictment of the educational system, but they just don't remember it. So you know,
Sometimes we forget what they don't know,
yeah,
Mhm.
as we're
exactly.
busy trying to tell them what they should know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you get them engaged besides building on this fear of them being left out? What else do you do? That strikes me as a negative way to get them.
It is. And I thought that it was interesting that it came out in like a Inside Higher Ed kind of report to be able to leverage the FOMO and turn it into a positive outlook, where you get them to show up to your events so that they can broadcast what you're doing so that other students are also wanting to come. And then some other trends that will never die is like, having food at your event. And so
It worked
but
for
don't-
us in
it
college.
does.
But don't they have to be vegan and gluten-free and free
Mm.
range, HMO, HBO? I can't remember which one. it
yeah,
is.
lots of dietary sensitivities.
Where'd that
But-
come from?
I had no clue.
It seems like there's a lot more food allergies and stuff like that.
I was raised in the country, so I don't know.
And once it quit quivering, you ate it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I
as
know.
someone who deals with this issue,
Um,
it's very important to
It
me.
is very important. I understand, but has there been a trend, in your opinion, towards dietary sensitivity?
Yeah,
and all that?
and I would argue it started with peanut allergies.
Yeah.
And, that can cause serious
It
health
can
issues.
kill you.
And then, 18 years ago, I was diagnosed with celiac disease. And so all of a sudden can't have gluten.
Mhm.
And that changes your perspective.
Probably not all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't have had it all along.
Yeah,
but-
exactly. That's a whole nother thing. But
Yeah.
Right.
but all of a sudden, and then other people started saying, well, I'm allergic to this and I'm allergic to
Well,
that.
that's what I
So
noticed
it's
when
really picked up.
Mhm.
I was taking my daughter to look at colleges. Well, both of them.
Mhm.
Is that they would have food service that would respect these sort of different sensitivities. And I had someone who will remain unnamed but's related to me declare herself gluten-free
Mhm.
and gluten intolerant, except she really liked beer. So that
Oh.
was still in the mix.
Sorry, that doesn't work.
So I was like, oh, that's it. Now the doctor declared you gluten-free. I said, no, this is kind of self-diagnosis, but I'm not giving up beer. So it's like, okay. So this is actually a lifestyle thing. Anyhow, I've got questions about politics coming up.
We got to take a break.
Welcome to State House Press, a nonprofit publisher of quality books. State House Press and the McMurry Foundation Press are part of the Texas A&M University Press Consortium, which handles retail distribution for several small but distinguished publishers. Our entire list of offerings, with pictures, summaries, prices, and easy online ordering, is available in our section of the consortium website. State House Press is proud of its reputation for high standards of scholarship and readability. In addition to this, we at State House Press have recruited the talents of individuals such as Phil Collins on his book, The Alamo and Beyond. We release not only texana by contemporary authors, but reprints of classic accounts of Texas life and history otherwise inaccessible to the public. Our book list also incorporates the publications of the McMurry Foundation Press, specializing in the history of the Old South and the Civil War. We strive with our titles to make history accessible to as many readers as possible. To accomplish this task, we have recruited some of America's leading historians, as well as bright new scholars. We believe firmly in narrative history, in telling a good story, and in telling it well, without losing sight of the people who've made history and the events that changed a nation.
For questions or business inquiries, please visit the Texas Book Consortium at www.tamupress.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back. And this is Paul Fabrizio.
I'm Don Frazier, and this is Erica Medina, the Assistant Dean for Student Engagement.
Yes.
So, Dean Medina.
Sounds
Dean
weird.
Medina. It does. It sounds like lyrics to something, doesn't it? Before the break, I mentioned I want to talk a little bit about politics.
Yeah.
So are we talking about Bernie Sanders politics? Are we talking about international affairs? Are we talking about it all?
From my perspective right now, maybe international politics,
Okay.
because we have a growing population of international students on our campus. So we have.
Why is that? Well, I mean, because when I first started teaching here,
Mhm.
there wasn't really any international students. We get
There wasn't students from Oklahoma.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
exactly
I mean-
right. And it's, yeah.
I don't really know either because I've only been here for a year. But what I am assuming is when we got our new VP for Enrollment Management, he just had connections in different places that our previous
Folks didn't.
didn't.
Okay.
Right. And so I think that just purely off of his contacts and his reach that we've been able to bring in a lot of different people, which is great.
But they're by and large mostly from the People's Republic of China and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's our two biggest demographics international.
So what sort of challenge does that pose for you as Dean of Student Engagement?
Yeah, so when McMurry started getting an influx of international students, we weren't exactly prepared for that. Not on the student engagement part, because you have to change your whole mindset of how you interact with international students,
Sure.
and then how do you help your international students get to know your domestic students, and vice versa.
Sure.
And so that's where I've kind of seen from my end where we do that, and now how we're doing it. We in the spring established a McMurry Intercultural Student Association, and that is an organization that is led by a group of international and domestic students, and they're just getting on their feet. So we will see what comes from them. I really have high hopes from them, but they have lots of great ideas. So we'll just see how it gets off the ground. So yeah, that's where we're at with that.
So how does that propel your need to keep an eye on international developments and things like that?
Yeah, so with our Chinese students, I mean, we watch a lot of the relationships that we have with other countries, like the U.S. relationship with China.
And right now it's a bit tense.
1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have a trade war. Yeah.
Right, and it is tense, and so we're not getting as much students from that area anymore. I don't know if visas just aren't being approved for those students. So the students that we have are transferring in from other institutions in the U.S. We're not getting the same students from China, coming directly from China to McMurry. We do have a couple exchange students on our campus right now that have expressed interest in changing their status so that they can continue their degree at McMurry. So that's pretty cool for us. So they like it here, which is great. And then with our study students, watching relationships, they're not just our own, but Canada and Saudi Arabia had some words, and Canada didn't really approve of some of the human rights policies, I guess, that Saudi had.
Policies, that's what we'll call them.
Yeah.
You're good. You should be in diplomacy.
Did you see how you did it?
Yes.
Kind of a raised eyebrow, but I knew what you meant.
Yeah. And so the Saudi government basically pulled their Saudi students, even those that were juniors and seniors getting ready to graduate.
Wow.
And so now they are being placed at other institutions across the U.S., and we're really hoping that we are one of them, one of the kind of the feeder schools. So I know that we have a pretty strong agreement with, I think it's King Fahad, but our VP for Enrollment Management, that's his world.
So you just have to make sure that when they come here, they're engaged.
Right.
And do everything you can to make sure they get involved in student life.
Yeah.
So they're leaving America's hat, Canada,
Uh-huh.
and transferring to schools in the United States. So you probably interact with transfers as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And see, what my daughter's a transfer student
Mhm.
to McMurry, and so one of the things I was hoping you to discuss is what efforts do you make for transfer students?
Yeah.
And I mean, because you talk about orientation, but that's really for freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of our students are transfer, and they're also not non-traditional students.
Right. And they're tough
They're
because
tough.
they are, because they're, like you said, they're not always traditional age students. And sometimes they do come in older. They do come in with families and things like that. So we have to be very intentional about what we're inviting them to and making sure that our programming is family friendly. Because not only are they going to bring their families, and we want them to, but we invite faculty and staff to come, and they always bring their families. So the programming that we do, we have to make sure that it is family friendly, and if it's something that is not, then we let them know. Like, hey, maybe like a 6 or 7-year-old shouldn't be here, like mixed in with a group of 18-year-olds, for the simple fact that
That's a general rule across the board in all circumstances.
well, I mean, it's things like so we have family weekend coming up, and we have inflatables. So we make like kind of a kiddie corner, but then kind of a big kid corner.
Yeah, because they will pound each other in those inflatables.
Right,
And-
right.
and
Well,
if you-
both the 6-year-olds and the 18-year-olds
Well, yeah.
will do that, but
You put that
different
6-year-old in there, and somebody
Yeah.
jumps on it, and next thing you know, a 6-year-old is launched into the stratosphere.
But with Welcome Week, I will say that I do carve out a transfer student schedule based off of our Welcome Week schedule, and we will create these flock talks, is what we call them, where they can get to know other transfer students, and we again select the events that they would probably feel comfortable coming into, and that they could also bring their family to during Welcome Week. So we've been intentional about that, and we haven't had a ton of students do it. But a few have, and a few have then come back and express, hey, can I actually go through Welcome Week? So they will start in the fall,
Oh, wow.
be kind of uneasy about Welcome Week, but then message in the spring and say, hey, can I actually go through Welcome Week even though I don't have to take a seminar? So we did let one of our students do that this time around, and that was great for him. So
Well,
Yeah.
good.
yeah.
Well, my daughter went through a couple of things with Welcome Week,
Okay.
and there was another woman that she met,
Mm-hmm.
and the problem was they forgot to exchange phone numbers.
Oh no.
So they haven't seen each other in the 3 weeks of school since
Oh,
then.
man.
And they
So they're
just
looking for each
forgot to
other.
do it. And, so my
It's
daughter
like meeting somebody on a bus and forgetting to
Yeah,
get their number.
exactly. It's like,
Weird.
oh,
Our campus isn't super huge. Hopefully she can,
hopefully they'll run across each other, these two
Mhm.
women, but they haven't yet. So
or maybe reaching out to some of the registrar's office and
and find out, where are you?
Mhm. Like, do any of these names sound familiar to you?
Yeah. Would you happen to know what % of the campus here is transfer students or non-traditional students?
Are you counting international students in that or not?
I would
no.
count international students in there too. I don't know. I used to know this, but I don't know.
I don't
anymore.
know the transfer to like traditional students, but I can give you kind of spot on numbers for international students. We have about 45 to 50 international students on campus, and expecting to grow in the spring.
So
Yeah.
that's probably split 50-50 between Chinese and Arab, or
We have more Saudi students than we do Chinese students.
okay.
Yeah, and several of them are majoring in political science.
Well, I asked
Yeah,
one of them
which is interesting.
about that very thing. I said, "Why are you majoring in political science?" And he said, "Because you're looking at the first president of the Republic of Saudi Arabia."
Oh
And
no!
I said, "I don't think I'd say that out loud,
Yeah,
pal."
and you just put it on this.
Hey, I'm just telling you what I'm hearing.
Okay.
But I mean, what are they? It seems like these students should all of a sudden be transformed by what they're being exposed to here.
That's the idea.
That's the idea. Well, I wonder if they're sponsoring governments understand that, knowledge is power, and these guys are getting educated, and they're going to come back talking about things they heard out of your skull and out of mine.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh,
I just
man.
have several of them taking various American government classes.
Yeah.
And they provide an interesting outsider
A
perspective.
Great outsider.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love talking to our international
I do
students.
too.
It's amazing the stuff that they come up with and the way that they see things differently. This year we had two international students on our orientation team, and there's a question that we always ask about the demographic or the relationship between like a peer leader and an orientation leader, and then a first year student. Not to date the freshman kind of thing. And then one of the questions that we ask is, what do you do if a first year student is flirting with you? Favorite question ever, what is flirting? Oh my God.
Seriously.
Cindy
What
Martin
constitutes
and I, we just
flirting?
looked at each other
Yeah.
and we were like,
Yeah, guess we'd better define the terms.
so it's
How
great.
would you define that?
Well, it changes by culture.
Yeah, I guess
It definitely does, but by far my favorite question ever asked.
Well, and I'm sure that there's some interesting conversations that are had because this is a Methodist institution,
Yeah.
founded in the Christian tradition,
Mhm.
and our Saudi students are probably almost universally Sunni Arab or
Mhm.
Sunni Muslim. I mean,
Mhm.
there might be some Shia in there, but
Yeah.
probably all.
And we have provided a prayer room for them.
Yep, and we are in the process of creating a prayer room for the women because the one that we have is just for men primarily. So we are opening a space for our Muslim women.
Okay,
Mhm.
very good.
But that's an interesting new
It
development
is.
on campus too, and it's been interesting to watch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was controversial when it was first announced,
Mhm.
and since then it seems to be it's the normal thing. We got to take another break,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
We'll be
so-
right back.
History has become one of the most fought over battlegrounds in terms of shifting people's views and opinions about their country. In response to this, we have decided to launch a website called Go To History that will become your home for clear-eyed history content. Our objective is to put history out there, free of agendas, and allow you, the viewers, to decide what you believe and decide how to interpret this information. With experienced professors such as Dr. Don Frazier and Dr. Stephen Harden teaching courses and creating agenda-free content for students and just plain history enthusiasts, the content of Go To History is vastly informative and unbiased.
History people, it's Phil Collins here. I am just giving a shout out to a couple of guys that you're going to be hearing from. And they're good friends of mine, but they're also incredibly knowledgeable historians. Dr. Donald Frazier and Dr. Stephen Harden. Both great friends of mine, both helped me out with my book on the Alamo. And two guys, if you don't know much about history, these are the first two guys you should go to. Okay, what they don't know isn't worth knowing. Don Frazier, Steve Harden, I hope you enjoy their presentations.
My name is Evan Williams, a history major at McMurry University, and I love the layout of the Go To website. I mean, it is singularly built from the ground up with user convenience in mind. Every study available is within a single Courses tab, with each lesson having a single page for each of its individual videos, text, visuals, and quizzes, all at easy grasp. This is most definitely history made simple.
Please log on to www.gotohistory.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back, and I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier.
Frazier. And this is Erica Medina.
Dean Medina.
Dean Medina. Assistant Dean of
Student engagement. Mhm.
Now, one of the parts of your job, and you mentioned at the very beginning of the show, but we need to go into it now, is social clubs.
Yes.
Okay, now, social clubs in other campuses in other cities are called sororities, fraternities.
Mhm.
And they have a bit of a controversial reputation.
Can we define terms first? I mean, what's the
Please.
difference between a social club at McMurry and say, I tap a keg at State University X?
I tap a keg. That's very good.
So the difference is on larger campuses and some smaller ones. I don't know why Abilene, in general, the 3 universities here do not have.
Well, the old rumor was, do you want it or shall I?
You do it. You're the historian.
The rumor was, and I have never found anybody that can run this to ground,
Okay.
was that you couldn't have that many unmarried women living in the same house.
I've heard that too.
Okay, and so I have never heard anybody show me the document.
Because there isn't any.
Yeah, I think that's just
The reason for it was that the city council,
Mm-hmm.
in an effort to control fraternities and sororities, banned them and said that the local universities must not have any connection with a larger
with a
organization.
national
with a
fraternity.
national fraternity
I
or
wonder-
sorority.
So that was a city council
That was a
decision?
city council decision way back.
So it could be upended.
It could be,
Interesting.
but it would take some effort to do it because
Yeah.
it's not something that anybody thinks about anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
I think that would solve a lot of issues personally. But anyhow, so now
So-
we've got that. So we've got non-nationally affiliated social clubs that still have sort of quasi-Greek names.
Yes.
Mhm. So at larger institutions, they fall under different different conferences or different what are my words, like councils. So
Sure.
um
So there's different governance.
there are lots of different ones. So there's like a National Panhellenic Conference, Interfraternity Council, your NPHC, so National Panhellenic
D.
something. I don't know.
Whatever.
It's a
National
lot.
Panhellenic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of those, and then they all have the small fraternities and sororities that parcel out from those governing bodies. So we have kind of a different version of that same setup. So we have a women's interclub council and a men's interclub council that is a governing body of all of the individual social clubs. So we
And how many
have-
do we have on campus?
So 6 women's social clubs and 5 men.
Okay.
5 men's social clubs.
And you're in essence in charge of them
Yeah.
with the dean of students.
Mhm. Yep. So the dean of students currently is one of the advisors for the men's interclub, and then myself and Rhonda Holscher, our nurse. She's also an advisor with the women's interclub council.
What is the point of these social clubs? Why do they exist?
To make friends. No, just kidding.
Well, I asked the same question to my daughter, who's at a different university,
Mhm.
and she just went through Rush and all that sort of stuff. And there was a lot of crying and angst and all sorts of stuff. And then it's expensive.
Mhm.
And so I'm asking myself, what's the point of all this? And does Generation Z care about that anymore?
Okay, so
At least from what I've seen, not exactly. So social clubs are truly what they are. They're social clubs. They're social organizations where you can come together with people with like-minded values and morals and all of those things. So each of the social clubs has a set of values, a set of beliefs, and this is what they are all agreeing to uphold when they go through the entire pledging process and recruitment and all of that fun stuff. The language that we use here is different than what national sororities and fraternities used to, and we are in the process of kind of updating our language to be more inclusive and all of those things.
what is the university's attitude about pledging and hazing? Because all you have to do is look at
Yeah.
Yeah,
the news
hazing.
and you can see
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff that's taking place, in other campuses. So what
Yeah.
do we do here?
So what we do right now, they are in a very small fall pledging process right now. So maybe not this. In 3 weekends, I believe we will have them here for a half day, and we will talk about hazing and the different forms that it takes. Give them alternatives when they're creating their pledge programs. So these are things that we have them turn in a pledge program which outlines their pledging process. What are you taking your members through? We have them think about what they're doing and the impact. So intent versus impact. Making them think to those things.
So this could range anywhere from paddling or making them binge drink
Right.
to
Locking
maybe
them
even
in a
wear.
room.
What's that?
Locking them in a dark
Yeah.
room for
Or
hours.
maybe even making them wear some sort of
Mm-hmm.
uniform.
So the uniforms we don't do, we're kind of a little more lax on. But for sure, all the other things we don't really tolerate it.
Yeah.
So we've been really good about telling our students, because so Dean Allen and I are both new in our role.
Yeah.
And I do have experience advising national fraternity councils and things like that. So I see it from a complete different world and where they're coming from and where we're trying to
Yeah,
be.
because down at McNeese, they had national fraternities and
They do.
sororities. Yeah.
So
you
I
saw that
advise
up front and
Panhellenic.
personal.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that world is tough, especially to get through the circles and kind of the mob mentality around certain things.
Sure.
Especially with women. Oh, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, I can tell you.
Yeah,
So,
crazy.
Brutal.
so, I mean, you're sort of painting a negative picture.
But it isn't.
It isn't.
It isn't if it's done right. If
Yeah.
the training is in place,
There you go.
which we are putting all of that stuff in place. And luckily, we haven't had a ton of like hazing issues on our campus, which is great. Our social clubs are growing, which is awesome for us when they're kind of on a decline in other places.
Okay.
So that's great for us. We just outlined, our formal fall pledging process, which is great because we never had one. We've never done fall pledging. And doing the fall pledging allows for students who couldn't go through in the spring, maybe because they were busy with sports, they had a spring sport, or
Sure.
their major didn't allow them to, all their classes were a little too heavy. So
And in the end, social clubs are about retention.
yeah, as
They
student
keep
organizations and
students
There's
coming
that
on
word again.
campus. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is how we
Mhm.
began this thing.
It's cheaper to retain them than it is to recruit them.
Right. So once they come
Yeah.
here, once parents and kids make the decision to come here,
Mhm.
we want them to stay.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite tagline in my role is "Engaged students are retained students," and it's just that simple. And so that's kind of the mindset that we operate off of.
Okay, we've
Engaged
got
students?
23
Okay.
seconds. Do you have any final thoughts you want to say?
I think that coming to McMurry is an awesome decision. It's the best thing you could probably do for yourself. And then when you get here, come find me so we can figure out how to plug you in.
Yeah. Come here, stay here.
Yeah, come here and stay here. It's great.
So our thanks to Erica Medina. We
And
really appreciate you being
Class
here.
dismissed.